Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And as we talked about the last time that we spoke with Lori, we're going to do a few on how to be a VC, which is something that we ostensibly know about. Because for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And Lori is one of our new teammates, an investor based in New York. And so last time we talked about just in general, how can I be a good VC? And so Lori, what's today's question?
So today we're talking about a very hot, exciting topic, sourcing. So my question is, as a VC, as a really seasoned VC, how should people think about finding new deals to invest in?
Yeah. And so the first time we talked about serving companies, winning the right to invest in them, deciding on the investment and finding them in the first place. So now we're starting at the finding. And so the first thing I'd say is you want a theory of why would the very best founders come to you? And one way to think about that is who among the very best founders will come to you? Because unless you are Sequoia or Benchmark or name your firm that has done extraordinarily well, the chance that all extraordinary founders will want to come to you at the stage that you're at, whether to you as a firm or to you as an individual, which depending what firm you're at, you may need to think about both of those questions. Because if you're at a firm that has tons of people, then you may want to think about it, is why would they come to you? And then based on that, you're then picking likely communities or venues or channels where people will come to you. And that could be as varied as, I'm awesome at Twitter. I'm really funny. I'm not. But if I were really funny on Twitter, then maybe the answer is the people who have think that that's, that the insights I share are really useful are the ones who would come to me on Twitter. If I'm, really deep in the Berkeley community, well, maybe the answer is the very best Berkeley founders. In our case, as Bloomberg Beta, we are subject matter experts on the future of work because we're the first firm to do this. And on AI, we're the first firm to focus on AI. And so our hope is that the very best founders who want to do those things become aware of us through our expertise or, personal relationships. Or the other one is founder referrals, where we think, well, who should come to us? Anybody who knows or can get to one of the founders in our portfolio ideally will come to us because ideally they'll hear that we did good things. And I'm not saying it happens every time. But so what we think about is that's the kind of target. And then you need to give them a reason to reach out to you, which is usually start being useful to them. So as if in our model where the way we're useful to people is by putting founder service first, we just want to be valuable to them. And so some of the ways we do that is by trying to write content. Some of it is right here, right now. We're sharing how-to content. Maybe some founder is thinking, I want to be a VC in the future, and they're curious about that. But the sort of being a source of value to your sources in sourcing is, to us, the essence of it. But you need a strategy for it. You need to go out and then go find those things. And I'll just name a few other tactics that people use. One way to think about it is sales and marketing. So marketing is like what you're doing on social media, or maybe you're sponsoring conferences or you're speaking at something or something like that. The sales part of it is one-to-one. Now, the question is, how can you sell when you don't know who the target is? At a later stage firm, it's easier to identify because you're just looking at companies that have already been funded and are out there in the world. At an early stage firm like ours, it's harder to identify. And so what do? We have a list of people who we like working with, and we reach out to them proactively, or we thank them when they reach out to us. And we say, hey, we'd really love a startup that is doing a hot swap in the legal space or something like that. And maybe they know somebody. And if not, maybe we've reminded them. And so it's just sales and marketing, where our product we sell is money. That's how we think of it in our setup. But I don't know, Lori, as you've seen deals come in and you've started to source your own, new founder relationships, I'm curious what that raises for you, or any other questions, or what you've seen us do differently than what I just described.
Yeah, I think that really encompasses the majority of our sourcing. But as a new VC myself, who's building out my own network, one of the things that I found really helpful is joining any sorts of affinity related groups that help me meet new people, right? So whether that's going to in-person networking events where I live in New York, joining Slack communities, or other online communities, that has been a really great way for people to get to know who I am and then send me things.
Yeah.
And no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, any community where you have a differentiated value when you show up. So like, I don't show up at Stanford a lot because the ground is crawling with VCs there. And so I don't have that much to offer in that setting. I do sometimes, but my high school computer science email list, I'm on that. And tomorrow night we're sponsoring a get together for my public high school in New York City's alums in San Francisco, because I'm not the only one, but there's only 5 or 6 of us from that high school who are VCs, shockingly. And so I think you're right that joining or creating affinity groups, either around your affiliation with something, your membership in something, that could be demographic, it could be past experience, it could be, Airbnb alums, whatever it is,
Right.
or things you just give a shit about. A lot of times the distinction between an area of content that you're expert in and a community is a pretty thin distinction. So we were at the center of some of the AI communities that were emerging because Siobhan and James were really active early in AI. So they used knowledge and community in tandem with one another.
Right. And that I've seen that also go beyond just professional and work related communities. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people in tech who love running, right?
Totally.
Those things like that also are creative ways.
Burning Man is one of these sourcing communities that I'm never going to try to crack, but I'd be shocked if some of the greatest investments ever were not sourced directly or indirectly through Burning Man or cycling or EDM or one of these VC activities. Unfortunately, I don't really do many VC activities. So unless somebody's really into playing werewolf,
Well, that's okay. I think your network is still great. So I did have a question about. Oh, go ahead.
I also just say there's a major missing piece in my network, which is I never worked at one of the fastest growing startups ever. So the other thing I do in sourcing is I think, what are the flaws? And then how do we work with others who have done that? So we try to hire them in as fellows or build especially deep relationships. Obviously, James, Karen, and I all have different and complementary networks. James was a VC for a long time on Sand Hill Road. He was a software engineer. He's really into computing history. Karen is been on the scene in New York for as long as there's been a scene, that kind of thing.
Right. And so I'm curious for folks that are newer to the industry, who are just starting to build their network. One of the tips that you gave was reaching out to founders that are in a portfolio company of a VC. How have you seen people do that successfully?
I think that all outreach is really about trying to have empathy for the other person as best as you can guess at what it is, and showing up in a way that makes sense for them, is useful for them. It's sort of not a whole lot more complicated than that. But the hard part about that is it requires mass customization, because you're going to reach out to a lot of people and each one of them is an individual human. And so blasting out emails that are lightly customized, everybody knows what those are. And so it's going to vary a lot based on the individual circumstance of the person. And it's sometimes it's as simple as hey, I saw you launch this new product. I had one piece of user feedback for it. And hey, by the way, will you introduce me to a VC? That kind of thing, which is fine. I'll also just say most people, when they're starting, the error they make is that they fall in love with what's interesting to them, as opposed to the other person they're trying to reach out to. And so a very frequent thing here is they just kind of fall into tech buzzwords that are just not that distinctive. They're the number of people last year who are I'm a Web3 investor. And it's well, I don't know, do you have something different to offer in Web3? And what's often surprising for people is how narrow you can be and still be really valuable. If all some sourcing person was listen, I'm the best VC ever at knowing how to fix your cap table on Carta, and I'll do a 10-minute session with you, and at the end of it, your cap table is going to be glittering, I guarantee you there are founders who would flock to them. So narrow, very, very narrow is actually really okay, because while it may not catch as many people, it'll catch intensity, and you only need one outlier.
Right. So I think that's the homework assignment, right? For anybody watching and probably for myself too. Find that thing, write it down, experiment, whether that's the right thing.
Experiment is the right word, because I often also find people are going and getting advice about what area they should specialize in. It's I don't know, just fucking start. And the world will tell you more than anybody, any expert. And you said seasoned. I think of myself as a new VC. We are 9.5 years in, and that's long enough to see one cycle of companies. mature and become successful, but that's still a very small N. And so the challenge here is we got to get bigger N. And, it took me, maybe I'm still working on this, but I would say it's took me 2 years before I even realized how much of the deal flow I was getting was just fucking noise, was just like garbage stuff from people who were half-assing it as founders and part of what we do with our content is obviously we try to source with our operating manual that people can look at. If they go to our website, they can see, we try to be the most transparent VCs, but that people are often like, oh, that must get you a lot more deals. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily, but it definitely gets us less noise. And so if people go look on our website, they'll see like basically it's a stupid test. If you pitch us and there's some obvious reason on our website why we're not a fit, it's like, well, you failed the stupid test. So I don't want to work with you.
Which is
unless, by the way, the person had some reason why they shouldn't have looked at it or learned about another way, individual circumstance, and they're the potential customer. So like how much burden can I really put on them? I don't know.
That's true. And that also points to the opposite problem. If I was asking for somebody originally who's new to the scene, who would be looking for more deals to source, you get to a point where your inbox is flooded and being discerning is actually the challenge and the skill to grow.
Yes. Although I'll also just say the danger there is resting on your laurels because like the signal could always be more. So it's definitely like a VC version of always be selling or always be closing or whatever the, Glengarry Glen Ross was, is always be sourcing.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to the tweet that you had kind of blow up this week about VCs quiet quitting and kind of like really relaxing on the job.
Yeah. And the benchmark answer to that is they want you to age out pretty early. And because they're like, well, you're just going to quiet quit. So we might as well fire you. Or not fire you, but gracefully transition you into the night. We love you, Bill Gurley, or something. I don't know. So that's the thought on that. But then we can get into that around the discernment thing, but definitely always be sourcing. If I could redo the quote card at the beginning, I think I would have made it always be sourcing. And so anything else, Lori, before we wrap?
No, this was awesome.
Yeah, fun. Thank you. Any other, and if obviously you get to ask wherever, but if you have any other questions that you have on your own sourcing, by all means. And then I think folks know if they want to find this or other past episodes, this is notadvice.work. And we call it Not Advice because we don't really know what you should do. And even in a business that we're in, we don't know what your strategy should be around it. And if folks prefer audio, they can go to Jam. And if you just go to jam.ai, you can find this and find a short audio once a week of This Is Not Advice. And Lori, I'm excited for the next one of these. I guess we'll talk about being discerning and how to pick which things to invest in.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah, to be continued. Thank you.